Long Island medium star Theresa Caputo cried live, asked for prayers for her family. Popular TV personality Theresa Caputo broke down in tears during a recent live broadcast. Her fans tried to comfort her, but she only asked for prayers for her family. Theresa said she was deeply concerned by the continued threats against her and her family, and asked her fans for love and prayers during this difficult time. His fans sent messages of love and support during the live broadcast, urging him to stay strong. However, it is still unclear how much danger he and his family are in due to the threat. Theresa Caputo's fans are now concerned about her safety and hope she overcomes this difficult situation quickly. Theresa Caputo sat in her dimly lit living room, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the messages on her phone. Her fans had flooded her inbox with love and prayers, but the weight on her chest remained. The threats had started as anonymous letters, short, chilling notes slipped into her mailbox. Then came the phone calls, distorted voices warning her to stop interfering with the dead. At first, she dismissed them as the ramblings of an obsessed fan. But when her daughter Victoria received a similar message taped to her car windshield, fear gripped Theresa like a vice. She had spent her life helping others find closure, connecting them with their lost loved ones. But now, it seemed someone wanted to silence her. During a late-night live broadcast, Theresa decided to reach out to her fans. "I don't usually do this," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I need prayers, not just for me, but for my family. There's something happening, and I don't know how to stop it." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, the world saw the fearless medium shaken. As the live chat filled with messages of support, a notification flashed on her screen. "You shouldn't have done that." Her breath caught in her throat. Was someone watching her? Determined to protect her family, Theresa hired a private investigator. The findings were chilling. Her every move had been tracked for weeks. Security footage showed a hooded figure lingering near her home, lurking in the shadows. Police increased patrols around her house, but the threats didn't stop. One evening, as she tucked her grandson into bed, the lights flickered. A cold breeze swept through the room, making the curtains billow. Theresa's heart pounded. She turned toward the doorway and froze. A figure stood there. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face she recognized. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone she once trusted, someone who had turned against her. And they weren't alone. As realization dawned, Theresa knew this was far from over. However, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Theresa Caputo sat at her reading table, her hands resting on a deck of angel cards. She had done thousands of readings in her life, but this one felt different. The presence in the room was strong, overwhelming even. A woman named Lisa sat across from her, clutching a tissue in her hands. Her eyes were already red from unshed tears. "I don't usually get this feeling so intensely," Theresa admitted, pressing a hand to her heart. "But someone is here, and they have a lot to say." Lisa nodded, her breath shaky. "I was hoping to hear from my brother Danny." As soon as she said his name, Theresa felt a warmth wash over her. A young man's voice echoed in her mind. "Tell her I'm still looking out for her. I never stopped." Theresa gasped. "Lisa, he's calling himself your hero. Does that mean anything to you?" Lisa let out a sob, covering her mouth. "He saved my life when we were kids. We were at the beach, and I got caught in a rip current. Danny swam out and pulled me back, but he didn't make it." Theresa closed her eyes for a moment, letting the energy settle. "He wants you to know that he has no regrets. He says, 'I would do it 1,000 times over, Lisa. You were always meant to live.'" Tears streamed down Lisa's face as she clutched her chest. "I've carried so much guilt, Theresa. I felt like I should have been the one." Theresa reached across the table, taking Lisa's hands in hers. "Danny says that's not how it works. He's been by your side all these years. Every hard moment, every triumph, he's been there." Lisa sniffled, nodding. I feel him sometimes, in the little things, a song on the radio, the wind at the right moment. Theresa smiled. That's him, and he wants you to live fully, for both of you. He says, no more guilt, sis, just love. Lisa let out a breath, a weight lifting from her chest. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. And somewhere beyond the veil, Danny smiled. However, Theresa Caputo, known for her unique abilities as a medium, had always carried a heavy heart. Her life was filled with messages from the other side, and yet, one thing remained beyond her reach, her own family's peace. As a mother, she had been consumed by her work, and her strained relationship with her children was beginning to show. Victoria, her teenage daughter, had always been the quiet one. She spent hours locked in her room, her once vibrant personality now overshadowed by an inexplicable sadness. Theresa noticed, but never fully understood. She tried to connect, but the distance between them seemed to grow with every passing day. One rainy evening, as Theresa sat on the porch sipping her coffee, she felt a presence, a familiar energy that she'd once known deeply. The air shifted, and before her stood Victoria, but this time, it wasn't the young girl Theresa had raised. Victoria's eyes were hollow, and her voice echoed with an unnatural calmness. I need to tell you something, Mom, Victoria said softly. It's about what's going to happen. Theresa felt a cold shiver run down her spine, her intuitive nature sensing something was amiss. She stood, reaching out for her. Victoria stepped back. I'm taking responsibility for my own death, Victoria whispered, as though rehearsing the words. I've made a decision. Theresa's heart skipped a beat. The world around her seemed to freeze, the weight of her daughter's words settling in her bones. What are you talking about? Theresa asked, her voice breaking. She stepped forward, her mind racing. Why would you say such a thing? I'm here for you, always. You don't have to go through this alone. Victoria's expression softened, but her resolve remained strong. I'm not going to let you carry my burden anymore. You have so much to carry with your work, your spirit guides, all of it. I can't ask you to carry mine too. Theresa reached out, her hand trembling as she touched her daughter's face, feeling the icy coldness of the moment. Victoria, please, she whispered, the pain of a mother's heart breaking in real time. I need you. You are my everything. Don't leave me. But Victoria pulled away gently, a somber smile on her lips. You've given everything you can, Mom. Now it's my turn to make the choice. Theresa wanted to scream, to demand that this was a nightmare, a bad dream. But she knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a figment of her imagination. Something had happened, something deep within her daughter's heart that had led her down a dark path. Suddenly, Victoria was gone, vanishing like a wisp of smoke in the fading light. Theresa fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as the weight of the conversation hit her like a tidal wave. She had failed to see the signs, failed to reach her daughter before it was too late. In that moment, the spirits that often guided her through life were silent. There were no messages, no whispers of reassurance. Theresa was left alone, wondering if her own choices had driven her daughter to make this heart-wrenching decision. Days turned into weeks, and Theresa began to unravel the truth behind her daughter's dark words. She learned that Victoria had been battling inner demons she had kept hidden for so long. The weight of the family's turmoil, the tension with her mother, and the constant expectations had broken her spirit. She had tried to reach out, but in her teenage rebellion, she felt that no one understood. Theresa, devastated by the guilt, began to spend every waking moment trying to connect with Victoria's soul, attempting to mend the bond they had once shared. She sought forgiveness, not just from her daughter, but from herself. She realized that despite her gifts, she couldn't save everyone. Some battles had to be fought from within. It was too late for Victoria, but Theresa vowed that her daughter's message wouldn't be in vain. She would dedicate the rest of her life to preventing others from making the same choice. It wasn't just about speaking to the dead. It was about reaching the living, about seeing beyond the surface and healing what was broken within. And so, Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, learned the hardest lesson of all, that even the strongest souls can falter, and that sometimes the most painful truth is realizing the love you give isn't always enough to save those you hold closest. However, Theresa Caputo, the renowned Long Island medium, stood by the window of her cozy living room, gazing out into the vast, cold night. The world seemed silent, but within her, there was a storm brewing. The weight of the last few days had been unbearable. Her thoughts swirled back to a painful memory, one that had been haunting her since the day her brother, Joey, passed away. "I feel like he was left to die," Theresa whispered aloud to herself as the words tore through her. Her heart ached with a pain that no one else could understand. Joey had been more than just a brother. He had been her confidant, her rock, the one who always stood by her, no matter what. They had grown up together, inseparable, sharing secrets, dreams, and endless laughter. But everything had changed in the blink of an eye. Joey had fallen ill, and his condition deteriorated faster than anyone had anticipated. Theresa had sensed something was wrong, but no one had listened. As the illness ravaged his body, she felt helpless, unable to offer the comfort she so desperately wanted to give him. The doctors had done everything they could, but it wasn't enough. The final day had arrived, and Theresa had been there, but not in the way she had hoped. She had been there physically, but mentally and emotionally, she had been battling her own demons. She felt the deep guilt that plagued her, thinking that she should have done more, should have seen the signs sooner. The idea that she had let him slip away, that he had been left to suffer alone, was unbearable. Joey's passing left a void in her life that she couldn't fill. She couldn't understand how someone so full of life could simply vanish. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear his laughter, still see the twinkle in his eyes, and it made her ache. In the days following his death, Theresa found herself in a deep, reflective state. She spoke to her spirit guides, trying to make sense of the loss. One evening, as she sat alone, tears streaming down her face, she felt a presence around her. The air seemed to shift, and she knew it was him, Joey. "I know you feel guilty," he whispered in her ear, his voice comforting yet firm. "But you didn't leave me to die, Theresa. You gave me the greatest gift you could, your love, and that's all I ever needed." For the first time in days, Theresa let go of the burden she had been carrying. She realized that while her brother had suffered, she had been with him in the ways that truly mattered. She had loved him, cared for him, and held him through his darkest moments. That was enough. As the days went on, Theresa began to find peace. She knew that Joey was at peace too, surrounded by light and love. The guilt that had once consumed her slowly faded, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude for the bond they had shared. And with that, Theresa Caputo found a new sense of clarity, understanding that sometimes, even in the most painful moments, love transcends everything. One evening, Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium, was sitting in her cozy living room, sipping a cup of tea. She was reflecting on how much her life had changed since she had first started her journey as a medium. The crowds, the TV show, and the countless spiritual readings had become a part of her everyday routine, but there was still a longing inside her for something more personal, something connected to her roots. Suddenly, she felt a strange, overwhelming energy fill the room. It was a familiar, comforting sensation, like someone was trying to reach her. She closed her eyes, and a voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Theresa, it's time to embrace your heritage." Startled, she opened her eyes and found herself transported to a small rustic town in Italy. She was no longer in her usual surroundings, but standing in front of a centuries-old villa, surrounded by cobblestone streets and the scent of fresh basil in the air. The language, the food, the culture, it all felt so natural, so right. And then, without warning, Theresa began speaking fluent Italian. She was speaking without effort, as if the words had been with her all along. "Che cosa sta succedendo?" she asked herself, bewildered by the sudden flow of Italian from her lips. It was as if some ancient connection deep within her had been awakened, a link to her Italian ancestors. As Theresa walked through the village, she encountered a group of elderly women sitting outside a cafe, chatting and laughing. They looked up, surprised to see Theresa, but then smiled warmly, as if they recognized her. "La Signora Caputo," one of them exclaimed. "It's been so long, you've returned." Theresa was speechless. She had no idea how these women knew her name, but a strange sense of déjà vu washed over her. As she sat down with them, the words kept flowing in Italian, and the women shared stories of her great-grandmother, who had lived in this village long ago. It turned out that Theresa's family had a deep spiritual connection to this town, and her great-grandmother had been known as a healer and a medium. The women spoke of her abilities to communicate with spirits, just like Theresa did, and how they had been waiting for her return to continue the family tradition. For the first time in her life, Theresa felt truly at home. As the night wore on, she realized that speaking Italian wasn't just a coincidence. It was a gift, a bridge to her family's past, and the key to unlocking the deeper understanding of her spiritual abilities. The next morning, she woke up in her Long Island home, the feeling of Italy still fresh in her mind. Theresa smiled to herself, knowing that this new chapter in her life had only just begun. She would embrace this Italian connection and, perhaps, even share this newfound language with her audience in the future. It seemed that the spirits had more to reveal than just messages from loved ones. They were connecting her to her roots in ways she never could have imagined. And this was just the beginning of her journey. Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome to my channel. I am Mina. Hope your day is so well. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe the channel.